Hey guys, good evening and welcome back to yet another episode of SAFT podcast. And yes, I'm back yet again after a break of 2 weeks. There has been some things happening at my
Yes.
end, but I'm glad that I'm back with you, Jacob. And it's always a joy to be here with you. So, what's up? How are you? I hope all's good
Oh,
at your
I'm.
end.
Yeah. Everything's great. Everything's going great. Well, and like you said, Piyush, we are testing out new recording styles and formats to bring the content in better quality and better
Yeah.
formats to you, our audience. And it. As some of you may recall that when one of our previous episodes, we couldn't get the audio quality to where we wanted it to be, and we really came back together and reassessed. Okay, how do we get off the plateau, as Steven said, in terms of content quality and get to the next level? So we thought, okay, we'll have to push ourselves a bit more, put in more efforts in pre-podcast preparations and all of that. And so this is
Yeah.
part of that. This is part of the revolution, sort of technical revolution at SAFT.
Yeah, so
But
as
anyway,
Jacob mentioned, I'll just say that every good thing has a disclaimer, right? So here's the disclaimer for this episode. It's that if there are any small glitches or anything, please bear by it because we are trying our
yeah,
best to bring the best content to you. And
true.
I'm sure that you guys are pretty gracious to, let that pass by. So I think
Absolutely.
without any further delay, we should straight off dive into what we are here today for.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
as you all
So
know
Piyush,
that, yeah,
you've been following up with the last episodes when Steven and I were on the episodes. So can
yes,
you just
yes.
give a quick recap to the audience what we've covered in the last episode? Just a breezing overview of what we've touched on.
Right. So those who are following us since since the past few weeks, you must have seen that we have been focusing on the Kalam cosmological argument, right? And
Yes.
there are different philosophers who have put in um, different arguments against it, and we have been talking about them. And in last week, we were talking specifically about J.L. Mackie, and he had made his point and he had his theory of cause and effect. So Jacob and Stephen did a great point explaining what it is, and towards the end, Jacob explained to us about the three arguments for premise one. So Jacob, can you say what is the premise one?
Yeah. So premise one is everything that begins to exist has a cause, and this is basically the first part of the Kalam cosmological argument.
Yes, I'm sure that our audience have also by-hearted it by now because we
Yes.
keep on repeating it again
We
and
keep on
again.
doing.
And so the three arguments of the premise one, they are, the first one is the metaphysical intuition. The second one is, why does everything or anything come from nothing? Right? We say that if something comes from nothing, then why doesn't everything or anything come from nothing?
Yes.
And the third one is our own experience, the experience which
Yes.
which we have as we live out in this world.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
if you want to, know more about it, we have chapter markers in the previous episode. You can straight away go and listen to them for a recap. Yeah.
Yes.
And so let's just move ahead. And since we have been talking about J.L. Mackie, and last week, Jacob and Stephen, they did explain to us about a lot of paths from his theory. And
Yeah.
today, okay, let me ask you one question. What was the core of J.L. Mackie's question or objection to the Kalam cosmological argument?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, like with an argument of the style of the Kalam cosmological argument, like a deductive argument, we had covered very early on, and Piyush, you'll also recall this, that we had covered very early on that if you want to disprove something of the form of a deductive argument, like the Kalam is, you would have to show that either the premises or the statements, right? Everything that begins to exist as a cause, the universe began to exist. You would have to show that either one of these are false, or you would have to show that the logic that is connecting these statements to the conclusion or the statements themselves is flawed. So what J.L. Mackie does is J.L. Mackie doesn't, come out and outrightly say that premise one or premise two is false. His objections, and we will look at this right after. His objections sort of have to do with sort of like his difficulty in coming to terms with the fact that there is a God who is the cause and the creator of the universe who is uncaused, like who brought the universe into
Okay.
existence for the very first time. And that is basically what where L Mackie stands upon. That is basically where what L Mackie's core objection is. And it's interesting to note. It's interesting to note that a superb and intelligent philosopher like L Mackie, when he's objecting to a deductive argument, doesn't go down the proper logical path of responding to it, but goes off on a tangent. And we've mentioned it elsewhere also, that when we come to the Kalam, I think we mentioned it in one of our first episodes as well, that the Kalam doesn't directly tell you in a core theological sense that the cause of the universe is the God of the Bible, or the cause of the universe is a God per se. Right? It says
Right.
that therefore the universe has a cause, and it's when we do what is addressed as a conceptual analysis of the conclusion, as in we are taking the concept and we are analyzing, okay, the cause of the universe exists, what is the nature of that cause? And it's when we do that analysis of the concept cause of the universe, or the source that brought the universe into existence, it is when we do that analysis that we get to see what is the nature of the force or the cause or the entity, whatever that may be, that brought the universe into existence. And that's how we get to the point and say, therefore God must be the cause of the universe. But
Okay,
in its core objection to the Kalam, if someone comes up and say, oh, if you say it's God, then why God? And if they come up along those objections that we will look into immediately, it shows that they aren't really taking on the core of the Kalam cosmological argument for itself. It's when you come up and say, no, the universe doesn't have a beginning, or the universe doesn't have a cause, or not everything that begins to exist must have a cause. It's when a person responds in that sense that they're going specifically to the core of the argument. So always be on the lookout when someone comes up, you're mentioning the Kalam argument, and someone comes up in response. Be on the lookout what exactly they're going after. Are they going after the core of the Kalam cosmological argument? If so, take it on there. If not, deal with it appropriately. So it's interesting to note that L Mackie himself comes out in this format.
Wow. So, okay, so this was the core objection, right? That
Right,
means
right.
there are other objections as well. Definitely,
Yes, so-
because, philosophers every
Well,
day
what
they
I
try
would-
to come up with new things to,
Yeah.
object against these arguments which we put forth. So, Jacob, how many arguments are there in total which L Mackie put forth?
So L Mackie basically comes out with 3 objections, right? And the
Okay.
objections take different form. And when I said this is his core objection in the sense that, well, you could say that of the 3, this would be the central one, and there are other 2 subsidiary. Maybe you could put something along that line. But I would say that his objection I would say that this is his core objection, meaning that this is the central theme that ties everything together. So if you were to take his
Okay.
3 responses to the Kalam, and if you were to ask, okay, what is the central theme running across these 3 responses? What I've listed out as L Mackie's objection or core objection would answer that. What is the central theme running through L Mackie's objection? And one thing I want to add in passing before we move even further, right? Because we're pretty soon going to respond to and look at L Mackie's objections, and we're going to move on to the next set
Yes.
of objections that has been brought in the Kalam in the upcoming episodes. You may be wondering, you are hearing L Mackie's name for the very first time, right? And you're wondering,
Yeah.
why are we even talking about this person I'm here for the very first time? I'm hearing about Kalam cosmological argument for the first time. I'm hearing all of this. Why are these guys talking about L Mackie? Why aren't they talking about what Richard Dawkins had said about this? Or what Daniel Dennett, you look at Daniel Dennett later on, or Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, or Sam Harris, or some of these more popular level famous guys that we have heard on stages and books and videos and so on and so forth. The reason is, like we said, the intent of the series is to look at the best that the opposition has to give, the best thinkers, the best objection that they have to give, and then break it down as simple as we can while maintaining the integrity of the content and present to you. So L Mackie's name is a very reputed name among philosophers. And so L Mackie comes out with objections that you would see lay persons also come out as well. So it would be along the line of saying, okay, why should we accept that God created the universe out of nothing? Or why should we allow God to be off the hook? Why should we permit God to exist without a cause? And people have objections to saying, okay, you're saying that God created space, time, and matter, the entire reality out of nothing, like creation out of nothing. That doesn't sit well with me. So you will see that these are some of the common objections that we put out as well. And Piyush, I think I've mentioned this to you as well. When we put out the first video on the Kalam, when we started with the natural theology series for the Kalam, one of the comments that came into a video was sort of like, I think about 10 objections to the Kalam, something of that sort. And we had told amongst ourselves that we will look at it when we will get to the end of the Kalam, that we will look at these objections and comments that have come in the video, and we will look at all of that. And you will see a lot of it repeating what we've seen philosophers like L Mackie put out. Other philosophers like Alex Malpass and others have also put out similar along the similar lines. What Alex O'Connor has put out, you will see these repeating in common layperson's interactions as well. So we are trying to get the best of both worlds when we are going after these names like L Mackie and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to mention that in passing. And like I said, L Mackie has 3 objections that he lists out. And let me just quickly point out what those 3 objections are.
So like L Mackie is the people's voice, you know?
Sort of like, L Mackie is sort of like the people's voice when it comes to the objections to Kalam. I think maybe he may be surprised to hear that. But and we're talking about this in the Indian subcontinent. I don't think he may have foreseen that down the line his objection would have been picked up by 2 young kids talking about the Kalam in the Indian subcontinent. So the 3 objections that L Mackie sort of lists out, and this is what Dr. Craig also references in his book, Reasonable Faith, which is the skeleton structure for our natural theology series as well. The 3 objections are, his first one is, and he says that, well, if God began to exist at some point in time, right, that God began to exist at some point in time, then this is equally mysterious, like equally profound or equally ambiguous, like saying that the universe began to exist at one point in time. Like, the universe didn't exist and then it came into existence. And we are wondering, what could that be? What could be the reason? Why didn't the universe exist before that? And so on and so forth. There is a mystery to that. And L Mackie says, if you say God began to exist at some point in time, then it is as equally mysterious. So he's saying that, well, you have to wrestle with both of it equally. You can't brush one another carpet. His second objection that Dr. Craig mentions is that he says that if you say God has always existed, like he has always existed, then we can also come up and say, we as in atheists, naturalists, materialists, we can also come up and say that the universe has also always existed. If you say God always existed, we will say the universe also existed. It is something similar on the lines of what Richard Dawkins also once asked. And I think, Piyush, you may have, if you've seen God's Not Dead, the first movie, I would say the better one of the 2. I don't know if that's a controversial statement to say, but in the first one, in the classroom scene, one of the students, she says this, if you say God created you, then I would ask, who created God? And that is one of Richard Dawkins' go-to phrasing of that. So in the same way, L Mackie asks, if you say that God has existed always, why can't we say that about the universe as well? Like, why are you giving this special pleading, right? This special case, special consideration for God, that you're not allowing the universe to exist always, but when it comes to God, you're fine with God always existing. And then his third objection was, but if you say that God is without time or he's timeless, right? In some sense, quite distinct to being limited within time, that he is without time, he is beyond time, he is timeless. If you say something along that line, then he says, well, that is incomprehensible, that it cannot be understood. It's quite vague and ambiguous and all the more mysterious to wrap our heads around. And so these are the 3 objections that L Mackie brings out.
Wow, that's like, when I heard these questions, I was like, I could relate, because people have asked me these questions. This is like, when we bring forth these arguments, some of these questions people do come and ask us. Now, I was just wondering, that when he has all these objections, and being a philosopher himself, Mackie has made these objections against the KCA, why doesn't he outrightly deny the premise 1?
Right. And, I was just looking at the time. I don't know if you noticed the time. We are at the last bit, last 5 minutes of the podcast. 20 minutes flies by so fast. So,
Right.
so the reason why L Mackie doesn't outrightly deny premise one. So, Piyush, what is premise
Yeah.
one?
Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that you guys will always say it right, and even when you ask me for a split second, my heart flutters because I wonder what if I mess it up on camera right now. So it's
Exactly.
always it's always a heart pumping moment. So the reason L Mackie doesn't outrightly deny premise one, and this is very important note. Like I said, when you have a deductive argument like the Kalam or the moral argument or the fine tuning argument or even something as complex as the ontological argument, any of these deductive like
Yeah.
this, if these are true and if the logic connecting these two are valid, then the conclusion must follow. When you look at arguments of that sort and you see someone isn't going directly after these premises or the logic, then it sort of will inevitably expose some bias, or I don't want to use cognitive dissonance on their part, but it's eerily similar to that sort. I don't want to use that with someone like as brilliant as L Mackie, but it comes very close to that. And the reason is, in the last episode we mentioned that L Mackie comes up and says, well, this thing, this premise one, that everything that begins to exist has a cause, is more plausibly true than not. And he says because this is confirmed in our daily experience. Right? And Piyush, when you were mentioning the three arguments for why everything that begins to exist has a cause, you mentioned metaphysical intuition, and then the question of why doesn't anything and everything come from nothing if
Yes.
the universe can come from nothing. And the third thing you mentioned was our daily experience, right? When we do scientific inquiry, and you are an engineer, you are an artificial intelligence focused engineer, and you work in the lab and as such. So right then and there, even within your engineering labs, or when I study economics and we're looking at what caused inflation to spike within the economy, or what caused the market to crash. When we look at all these stuff, we assume that if this thing has happened, if this event, the crash of the market, came into existence on August 28 or August 30 or something of that sort, we immediately, without even stopping to wait and ask, we immediately ask the next question. Okay, so which one of these factors caused it? We don't stop to ask,
Right.
did anything ever cause it? We don't. That question is not there in our mind. Our immediate thought is, okay, of these options, what could have caused it? Right? If the system backfires, if there's a bug in the system, or if the engine backfires, whatever be that sort, we immediately ask, okay, what of these possible options gave way to that? Not whether anything and everything ever gave way to that. No, we immediately ask, what exactly gave way to that? And that just shows that that premise one is constantly affirmed in a daily experience. And L Mackie also understands it. He knows that he can't outrightly go out against it. That is the reason, like I said, an experienced, intellectual, cerebral philosopher like L Mackie himself cannot come outrightly and deny premise one. And so that sort of gets us a gist of, it gives us an overwhelming, it gives us a holistic, an overall picture of what happens when people come with objections to the Kalam. It isn't always objections specifically with regard to the premises, but it is these background informations that we hold, maybe some sort of bias that may cause us to act similar to cognitive dissonance, where we aren't true to our understanding of reality, or we push out some information where we have confirmation bias. We want to confirm only things that we want to confirm, something along that line.
Yeah.
And that also sort of factors in, and it factors in with even the best philosophers. So
Definitely,
this is a good point for us to stop and reflect, and even for us as Christians, right? Within our theological understandings, for us to stop and think that there is a possibility that we could have gotten some of these our understandings wrong when it comes to theological points, or in our understanding of general reality as well. It's good for us to have so many arguments for God, which means that the possibility that we are wrong on all of these accounts is quite low. The probability that we are wrong on all of these arguments is quite low. But then we should have the humility to stop and reassess and say, why am I actually holding out against that objection? Why am I actually holding out against that argument? Is it because the argument is not truly convincing and doesn't make sense? Or is it because I want the argument to lead to some other conclusion? So I think that's a good point for us to get to conclusion to this episode.
Yeah, like that's what I like about philosophers like J.L. Mackie. They have this open-mindedness, and we have seen there are many atheists who are very deliberate. They deliberately
Hmm.
want to prove that these arguments are wrong. They don't have an open mind
Yeah.
and to see the overall picture. But over here, J.L. Mackie definitely he looks at the broader picture, and he is accepting the premise one, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, it's really good that you brought it up. Like, we as Christians, it's very important that we believe in something because we are 100% sure about it, not because someone told us, not because normally what happens is whatever our parents tell us, we believe it.
Hmm.
But it's good that we should
Yeah.
question, and we should understand it, because unless we are 100% sure about it, we won't be believing in it, right? So definitely that's a really good point to stop this episode at, and I'm really glad that we could talk about these points, and we'll be back after a couple of weeks. Until then, we have a lot of time to ponder upon these points and to think about it and evaluate ourselves and evaluate what we actually believe in,
Hmm.
right? So thank you guys for joining in. It was great to have you, and thank you for supporting us. And we believe that you will continue to follow us. Do follow us on our social media pages to stay updated. You can even sign up for our monthly newsletters. I know we had a long pause, and this month onwards we are back on track. And every month you will be receiving
Yep.
updates from Saft's end.
Yeah.
And if you are a graphic designer and you're interested to join the team, reach out to us. The email ID is given in the description. You can check that out and connect with us. We would like to connect with you and talk with you. And if you have any questions, you can send it to us. Um, yeah, so we would love to feature it on our podcast as well. And thank you once again for joining in. This is Jacob and Ankit signing off. See you next time.